The grocery shelf in front of you looks normal. The cans are there, the bags are stocked, the labels are familiar. But 12 specific foods are quietly disappearing. Not the whole category, not the whole shelf, just the version that actually matters. The large bag, the affordable can, the store brand format, the practical size that made the purchase worth making. And once those versions are gone, they tend not to come back. Number 1 on this list looks like the least dramatic item here. It is not. None of these foods are heading for the dramatic shortage people imagine when they hear the word stockpile. They are heading somewhere quieter. The affordable version discontinued, the large format retired, the store brand pulled without announcement, the practical size replaced by a smaller one at a higher per-ounce cost. These 12 items fail in different ways, which means the same pattern shows up in 12 different aisles. And the one at the end is the reason everything else you have stored either works or does not. Number 12, store brand canned soup. Walk through the canned soup aisle and count the store brand cans. Not the options, just the actual store brand cans. At many major chains right now, that section is contracted to a half shelf or nothing at all. The name brand wall next to it looks enormous. That is not a coincidence. When retailers cut their own brand soup, it is not because people stopped eating soup. It is because the affordable meal-based version, the can that functions as a complete lunch, a quick dinner, a no-thought hot meal, stops being worth the shelf space at low margins. What stays is premium. What leaves is the practical tier. The question to ask in that aisle is not whether soup exists. It is whether the affordable format that makes sense for a real household is still there. In a lot of stores, that version is already phased out. Storm night, Tuesday, nothing planned. The $3 beef and barley used to be the answer. If it has already been discontinued at your store, the next option costs more and fills the bowl less. Stock 6 to 10 cans of high-protein affordable soup while that format still exists. Once the premium shelf takes the whole section, the price floor is gone and it does not come back. But the soup aisle is just where this starts. The next one is a food you use every morning, and the package has been quietly lying to you about how much you are actually getting. Number 11, ground coffee. Large format, affordable brands. Here is what happened to coffee while most people were watching the sticker price. The price went up and the package got smaller at the same time. Those are not the same problem, and the second one is the harder one to notice. Ground coffee packages were reliably 16 ounces for years at standard grocery pricing. By 2025, multiple brands had confirmed reductions to 10.5 ounces, while keeping the container essentially the same size. If you were comparing price tags, you were looking at the wrong number. The tag stayed similar. The weight did not. And the reason it changed is not going away. About a third of U.S. unroasted coffee comes from Brazil. A 50% tariff hit Brazilian coffee in the summer of 2025. American purchases from Brazil dropped 52% in just a few months after it took effect. That kind of supply shock does not produce a temporary spike. It produces a permanent reset of what a can of coffee actually contains and what it realistically costs to put on the shelf. The large 30 to 40 ounce budget formats that made sense to stock have been quietly discontinued at many stores. What is left is mid-premium, priced as if it is the affordable option. Build a 6-month pantry without accounting for this, and the coffee supply runs out roughly a third earlier than expected. No dramatic moment, just a gradual realization that the usual amount bought was never actually the usual amount received. Buy the largest format at warehouse clubs. Check the ounce count on the bag, not just the price. The next food is getting more expensive in a way you cannot see at the register at all. Number 10. Dried beans. Large bag format, 2 lb+. The food is not the problem. The bag is. Dried beans are on every standard pantry list. They last years. They are cheap. They are nutritionally solid enough to anchor a meal. All of that remains true. What has changed is the size format available at most regular grocery stores. The 4-pound and 2-pound bags have been replaced by 1-pound bags at the same or higher per-pound price at many chains. Research tracking grocery package sizes over time has found that the average packaged food has shrunk significantly over recent decades, quietly adding percentage points to effective food inflation that shoppers absorbed without seeing it in the sticker price. Dried beans follow that same compression. The math changes quickly. A 90-day supply requires a meaningful quantity. At 4 pounds per bag, that is a practical number across a few shopping trips. At £1 per bag, the number becomes impractical for a normal grocery cart. Most people do not buy 25 bags of anything on a Tuesday. Stores earn more per pound on small packaging. Once the large format leaves a chain, it tends not to return. Ethnic grocery stores, restaurant supply outlets, and warehouse clubs are the places where large bean formats still consistently exist. That is where the practical version still lives. And the next food on this list is a format problem on something nobody thinks could have a format problem. Number 9. Iodized salt. Large format practical bag or canister. Salt never goes bad. A container from a decade ago works exactly as well as one from today. So the format retirement happening right now has nothing to do with supply or price pressure. It has to do with margins. The 4-pound and 5-pound sealed canisters and bags, the formats that make sense for cooking, seasoning, and preserving in real quantities, are being pulled from mid-tier and discount grocery stores and replaced with two things: the small cardboard tube and the premium sea salt. A standard 26-ounce cardboard tube seasons roughly 50 servings of food. A 4-pound sealed canister handles 400. The tube also has a moisture problem. Salt and humidity do not combine well in cardboard, and a tube stored near steam, rain, or a humid pantry shelf loses half its contents to clumping before you get much use from it. There is also a nutritional detail that gets overlooked in this shift. Premium sea salt is typically non-iodized. For households that depend on iodized table salt as a dietary source of iodine, this change matters beyond cost. Buy the large sealed canister at a warehouse club. It stores indefinitely in a dry spot. Once that format leaves a discount store, it almost never returns. And the next food is a format and a value problem sitting in almost every pantry in the country right now. Number 8. Peanut butter. Family or warehouse size 40 OOZ plus. Peanut butter has not changed. The jar has, quietly, repeatedly, over the past several years. And the jar change is what breaks the pantry math. The 40-ounce family size format has been migrating out of regular grocery stores. What most chains now carry is 28-ounce jars, frequently labeled family size or large, priced as if they are the same purchase they used to be. They are not. Multiple brands have confirmed jar reductions over time. The practical large format jar has become primarily a warehouse club item. The consequence is not obvious until you calculate it. 10 jars at 28 ounces gives 280 ounces. 10 jars at 40 ounces used to give 400. That is 30% less peanut butter for the same number of shopping trips, the same number of shelf spaces, the same grocery bill. A planned 90-day supply runs short by 25 to 30 days. Not because the plan was wrong, because the jar changed and nobody announced it. Open peanut butter lasts 3 to 6 months. The rotation timing matters for a working pantry. Smaller jars are more expensive per ounce and create more frequent replacement windows. Check the ounce count before you check the sticker. Warehouse clubs still carry 4-pound plus formats at meaningfully better per ounce value. The next food is the cheapest morning meal in most pantries, and the version that made it affordable has quietly been retired. Number 7. Rolled oats, large canister or 10 lb bag, store-brand format. Oats are supposed to be the pantry food that does not change. Cheap, long shelf life, flexible enough for breakfast and baking. But the store-brand large canister, the format that made the per-serving cost genuinely low, has been discontinued across a significant number of major chains. At many stores, the oat shelf now carries one name. The store-brand 42-ounce canister that used to compete beside it is gone. The price difference between what remains and what left is 30 to 40% per ounce. For a family of 4 eating oats daily, that gap adds up to over $130 a year on a single food. Not a crisis. A consistent, invisible cost increase on the cheapest meal of the day. The deeper problem is the pattern it starts. When a breakfast staple loses its store-brand competition, the price floor for the whole morning shelf lifts. Everything nearby becomes more expensive because nothing is holding prices down anymore. Build a 60-day breakfast supply with the old math, and then execute it with the new math. The same plan costs significantly more, not because oats changed, but because the format that made oats affordable did. Aldi, discount grocers, and warehouse clubs still carry large format private label oats worth buying. Sealed airtight, they last 2 or more years. But the next item is not about format at all. It is about a supply problem most people have never heard of. Number 6. Canned sardines, mackerel, affordable tins. This is the shelf-stable protein most people walk past, and it is also the one that has been the most consistently unavailable in its affordable form for the past year and a half. The problem is not the fish. The problem is the can. Tin plate steel, the material that forms the actual tin, surged 31% in cost in 2023. When the container costs significantly more to produce, the first SKU to disappear is the cheapest one. Store-brand sardine and mackerel tins were among the first to be cut. What remained on the shelf was the premium brand at roughly double the original price. Shipping disruptions in early 2024 caused stockouts at approximately 23% of retail locations surveyed across multiple markets. Nearly 1 in 4 stores without affordable sardines in stock at a given point. When those gaps occurred, the affordable format did not reliably return. One 3.75-ounce sardine tin contains about 20 grams of protein, 170 calories, and over 1,000 milligrams of omega-3s. The nutritional value per dollar, when the affordable format exists, is difficult to beat in the canned protein section. Check the generic or store-brand side of the canned fish aisle. If only 1 or 2 premium brands remain at $2.50 or more per tin, the affordable format has already left that location. Warehouse clubs and case orders online are currently the most consistent source. And from fish to meat, the next item used to be the most calorie-dense affordable protein on the whole canned food shelf, until it wasn't. Number 5. Canned corned beef. Affordable 212 format. If you have not checked the canned corned beef shelf recently, take a look next time you shop. Not because it is gone, because the price will tell you exactly how the market quietly restructured when nobody was paying attention. The 12-ounce can that used to cost $2.50 to $3 at most grocery stores now sits at $5 or more across major chains. That price did not spike temporarily. The market changed. Store brands were discontinued. The 2 or 3 affordable options that used to compete for budget shoppers are now down to 1 or 2 brand names with no competitive pressure. When competitors exit and do not come back, the price does not come back either. This matters because canned corned beef held a calorie-to-protein ratio and a price per serving point that the remaining alternatives on the shelf do not currently match. Canned chicken exists, Spam exists, tuna exists, but the calorie density per dollar that affordable corned beef provided is not available in the practical tier anymore. At $2.50 a can, stocking 3 for a storm dinner was a simple grab. At $5 each, it becomes a deliberate budget decision. That is a real change in how the pantry actually functions at the moments when it needs to. Every sale price on canned corned beef is now the stockpile window. The competitive floor that created the old price is gone. And if corned beef is about meat, the next item is about something even more foundational. The ingredient that makes everything in that pantry actually cookable. Number 4. Vegetable oil, large format gallon jug. Most people believe vegetable oil prices came back down after 2022. They came down from the peak. They did not return to where they were. And the reason they did not is the thing almost no one standing in a grocery aisle is thinking about. Roughly 30% of global vegetable oil production does not go to a kitchen. It goes into fuel tanks as biodiesel. International mandates requiring biodiesel blending in fuel, Indonesia increasing its requirement to 40% biofuel content, Brazil raising its own, have permanently changed who is competing for that oil. The food supply and the fuel supply are now drawing from the same production pool. That competition is not going away. It is growing. The FAO Vegetable Oil Price Index reached its highest level since July 2022 as of spring 2026. Historical average index values sit around 92 points. Sustained recent levels have been nearly double that. The gap between where prices were and where they are now reflects a structural change, not a temporary disruption that will eventually correct. At the store level, the gallon jug is becoming harder to find at regular grocery chains. Warehouse clubs still carry large formats at better per-unit pricing, but the practical large format jug is quietly becoming a warehouse-only purchase for most shoppers. A pantry full of rice, beans, and pasta needs fat. Fat is required for absorbing vitamins A, D, E, and K. Without it, stored meals become nutritionally incomplete in ways that do not announce themselves for weeks. 1 to 2 gallons per month is a realistic household use rate. Buy at warehouse clubs. The next item looks completely different, and it is the one most people never realize is missing until every recipe that depends on dairy stops working right. Number 3. Canned tomatoes. Store-brand crushed, Practical 28 oz size. Walk the canned tomato section and count what is actually there for cooking versus what is there for finishing a plate. Fire-roasted varieties, Italian imported whole peeled, organic options, single-serve formats. What is increasingly absent is the 28-ounce store-brand can of crushed tomatoes, the one that turned pasta into an actual dinner. The pressure behind it is documented. A 17% tariff on Mexican tomatoes went into effect in July 2025. About 90% of U.S. tomato imports come from Mexico. Major canned tomato producers reduced their product lines over the past year. Tomato prices were up roughly 23% year over year as of early 2026. That pressure flows through to the canned section, and the affordable store-brand SKU is typically the first to be cut when margins compress. Think about what one 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes actually does. It makes pasta sauce. It forms the base of chili. It becomes the starter for soup. 3 different meals from one can, at a cost that used to be well under $2. The $3 can of roasted vine tomatoes makes a garnish. They do not substitute for each other in a real meal plan, and treating them as equivalent is how a pantry runs out of actual dinners. A full shelf of pasta, beans, and oil stops assembling into food when the sauce base is gone. Everything is technically present. Nothing turns into dinner. Check whether the store-brand 28-ounce crushed tomato still exists at your grocery store. If it has been replaced entirely by premium imports, the practical sauce-based tier has already left that section. Number 2. Non-fat dry powdered milk, store-brand grocery format. Walk to the baking section and find the powdered milk. Then look at the brand and the price. At most major grocery chains right now, the store-brand box of non-fat dry milk is gone. What is available, if anything, is a specialty or premium product at $12 to $18 for a container that used to come in a basic cardboard box for $5 to $7. That affordable version has been quietly discontinued at many national and regional chains, without any announcement and without any shelf sign. The role powdered milk plays in a pantry is larger than most people realize until it is absent. It is not simply a backup dairy product. It is what makes oatmeal creamy instead of thin. It is the ingredient in pancake batter that changes the texture from batter to something that actually rises. It is the base for white sauce made from stored flour, for instant potatoes made correctly, for any baking recipe that calls for milk when fresh milk is not available. The USDA states that non-fat dry milk, properly sealed, can last 2 years opened and up to 10 years in optimal sealed conditions. One container makes the equivalent of more than 3 gallons of milk. The $6 version is gone from most shelves. The $15 version is what remains. The gap this creates is invisible until the morning the oatmeal needs it, or the flour recipe calls for milk, and there is nothing on the shelf in the format that used to cost what it should. Buy from warehouse clubs or online while the format is still broadly accessible. And that leads to number 1, the item that decides whether every grain and every flour container in the pantry is actually usable. Number 1. Dry active yeast, bulk jar or vacuum pouch format. Walk to the baking aisle and find the yeast. At most regular grocery stores, what you will find is a 3-packet strip. 3 packets, 0.75 ounces total, about 3 uses. That is the full yeast supply on a standard shelf, on any normal shopping day. In early 2020, yeast demand surged 600%. That number came directly from the VP of Manufacturing at one of the country's largest yeast producers. The supply chain took more than 50 days to rebuild after the surge hit. The president of the American Bakers Association said the industry had been completely unprepared because this kind of demand spike had never happened outside of the holiday baking season. The baking aisle was not low on yeast during those weeks. It was empty. The shelf came back. But normal at most stores means 3-packet strips. A 4-ounce jar if you happen to be in a store that still stocks it. Almost nothing in the format that makes practical sense for storing. A 4-ounce bulk jar costs around $5 and covers the equivalent of 18 or more strip packets at a fraction of the per gram cost. A 1-pound vacuum-sealed pouch from a warehouse club or restaurant supply store makes hundreds of loaves of bread and costs less than a full year of 3-packet strips at standard retail pricing. The math is not close. Here is the piece most people have not thought about. Yeast is a living microorganism grown in industrial fermentation facilities. A small number of large producers supply nearly all of the global dry yeast market. When demand spikes, a storm season, an economic disruption, a month when millions of households decide to start baking at once. The supply empties in hours and takes 7 or more weeks to rebuild. There is no secondary reserve. There is no backup shelf. When it is gone, and it takes the baking section with it for weeks. Most people building a grain pantry have never once thought about yeast. They stored rice, pasta, beans, oats, and baking mixes. They planned for protein, fat, and sauce. They have 30 pounds of flour and feel prepared. Without yeast in the right format, that flour makes crackers, not bread. Crackers. That is the weakest link in this entire list. Not because it is dramatic, because it is the only item here that activates everything else, and the format that makes it worth storing is already gone from most grocery shelves. Here is the full picture after all 12. The coffee package shrank while the price rose. The soup aisle looks full, but the practical can is phased out. The beanbag got smaller, and the stockpile math shifted quietly. The salt canister was replaced by a wet tube. Peanut butter stores 30% less than the jar used to imply. The store-brand oat canister doubled in effective cost per serving. The affordable sardine tin is absent from nearly a quarter of retail shelves. Corned beef doubled when the competitors left. Vegetable oil is now competing with a global fuel mandate for the same production. The crushed tomato base is being cut from the affordable section. The powdered milk that made baking work quietly left the shelf. And the yeast that turns stored flour into bread is down to 3 packets on a standard shelf day. None of this came with any announcement. The shelf looked normal the whole time. On your next 3 grocery trips, pick one food from this list. Check the format before you check the price. Not just whether the food exists, whether the version worth having is still there. Which one of these has already changed at your store? The size, the brand, or the format? Tell me in the comments.